And we apologize for being just a little bit late. We were dealing with some technical issues and wanted to be sure you had the opportunity to hear every word that Noma wanted to share with you today. So now that we're up and running, I want to take just a second to introduce her. And first of all, thank you for taking time out of your day to be here this afternoon. We know there are lots of things going on, but I think it shows your interest in our campus and in the responses that we collected from our students over the time frame in which that survey was administered. We're here today to just get that information and take a look at it. What we are going to do is Noma's going to share with us. It will tell us what we're doing right. It will give us some opportunity to consider some of those things we might want to look at. And it will also make us aware of perhaps some things we hadn't thought of before. So as I introduce Dr. Anderson, I want to share with you that not only is she the special advisor to the president of the system on matters of diversity, she has also chaired the UT System-Wide Diversity Advisory Council and has done so very capably. Although she hails from UT Health Sciences Center, we feel like she belongs to all of us. She's visited us quite a bit, and frankly, she's wearing the right colors, so that tells us she's in the right place at the right time. She'll share with us today the results of the survey that was conducted. At the conclusion, we'll have an opportunity for staff and faculty and students who are present to ask questions, and then we'd like to invite any media who are here to stay afterwards, and we'll have a chance to talk to you as well. So at this point, I'll turn it over to Noma.
Valerie, thank you so much. I'm so excited to be here. Let me see if I can get the mic in the right position so you can hear me. Oops. As Valerie said, I have the privilege of being chair of the UT Diversity Advisory Council. And Valerie is on the council, and Dr. Brown, Richard Brown is on the council, and it's representations from across the system. One of the recommendations that DAC made a couple of years ago was that we needed to survey our students. We needed to get an idea of their impressions of the climate on their campuses. And so what we did was follow that inclination, and today I would love to present to you the results of our student climate survey. Let me begin by talking about assessing campus climate. The first item there is that campus climate is a construct. And what that means is, as we progress through this presentation, you'll see that when we're talking about campus climate, it's not one thing. It is certainly a combination of a lot of factors. And so that's one of the points I think it's very important to make. So what we'll be doing is trying to define the construct of campus climate, current attitudes, behaviors, and standards and practices of employees and students of an institution. Today, we're talking about students. And what do we measure about students? Their personal experiences, their perceptions, and what the institutional efforts are. Campus climate and students. We know that how students experience their campus environment influences their learning and their developmental outcomes. If and when there are discriminatory environments, these have a negative impact on student learning. And we've all learned and we know that a diverse student body and faculty enhance student learning. This is an overview of the project. There were 3 phases to the project. In phase 1, there was a lot of institutional research data that was gathered across all of our campuses. And that was shared with the vendor who was selected to do this survey. That was Sue Rankin and Associates. So all the campuses sent Sue Rankin and Associates lots of demographic data about who the students are. And then we developed the assessment tool. And this was a partnership between Sue Rankin and our campuses. Sue Rankin and Associates had their instrument, and there was a system-wide team that looked at the instrument, adapted it, raised questions, made it suit the system. Every campus had a local campus survey team. That team did the same thing for each campus. They looked at the instrument added some items, deleted some items, redefined some items, so that the instrument that came from this in phase one was one that was both a compilation of Sue Rankin and Associates' experience and what the system and the individual campuses needed. Sue Rankin and Associates has done climate surveys at 190 universities. So they come to us with a great deal of experience. Phase one included administration of the survey, and we're going to get to that. Phase two was data analysis, and today we are at phase three, the final project of the final report and the presentation. Phase one began with the survey being developed and then an invitation going to all the students across the entire system from President DiPietro, and then the chancellor at each campus also invited the students to participate. At 4 of the 5 campuses where the survey was administered, the survey was administered from January 24th to February 24th. And so what are the projected outcomes? The University of Tennessee Chattanooga will add to its knowledge base with regard to their students something about how the students feel about their campus, their learning environment, and how the institution responds to that. UT Chattanooga will use the results of this assessment, this survey, to inform current and future work. Let me share a little bit about the methodology. There were 84 to 83 questions on the survey. It was volunteer participation. Students did not have to respond, and they did not have to respond to all of the questions. And many of the questions said, check all that apply. So when you look at some of the data, it won't add up. It'll be more than 100% because they checked more than one box per question. So that was one thing that happened. I wanted to let you know that also students took this survey in a confidential, anonymous manner. Now, there were some questions where fewer than 5 people responded, and so those data were not analyzed separately for those questions. We were concerned that the anonymity of the student may be broached if a student could be identified if they were in a small N situation. And so where there were small groups, the data were combined, and I give the example of religious and spiritual affinity. In addition to agnostic and atheist, there were 20 religions that were listed that students could check. Well, you can imagine among 20 selections, there will be several that would be fewer than 5. And so this is an example where if there were fewer than 5, those categories were combined, called other than Christian, because Christian was the overwhelming majority of the answers. And so where there were smaller groups, they were combined and they were labeled so that you know that that is what happened. And so let's move on to find out more about the study. These are the top takeaways, the top line takeaways. At UTC, 85% of the students were comfortable with the overall climate. 82% of UTC students who took the survey were comfortable with the climate in their academic departments. A third of the students who took the survey did feel that faculty prejudged their abilities based upon their identity, and slightly less than a third of the students who took the survey felt that staff prejudged their abilities. 72% agreed that they felt valued by their faculty in the classroom. 10% indicated that they personally had experienced exclusionary, intimidating, offensive, or hostile conduct. This was an extremely and immensely impressive response rate. 249 UTC students responded to the survey. That is outstanding. 31% of your students took the time to respond to the survey. So as I think about the survey, I see this as the students' voices. And so I'm excited to share this with you. 31% of your undergraduates took the survey. 2,849 undergraduates took this survey. 31% of the graduate students took the survey, 400 in number. 36% of women students took the survey. That was 2,111. 23% of the men students on the campus took the survey. We had 40 transgender or other gender identity students take the survey. That's less than 1% of the population on campus. So now we're going to look at the demographics of the students taking the survey, those 3,000 students who took the survey. In terms of sexual identity, 214 undergraduates self-identified as LGBTQ, 24 graduate students identified as LGBTQ, 2,500 undergraduates identified as heterosexual, and 362 graduate students identified themselves as heterosexual. In terms of racial identity, 31% of the students at UTC took the survey that were white. 31% of the white students took the survey. 26% of Asian students took the survey. 26% of African American students at UTC responded to the survey. 20% of UTC's Hispanic student body took the survey. And you see the numbers here. 23 students, Middle Eastern, Southwest Asian students responded. 7 Native Hawaiian or Pacific Islanders responded. 13 American Indians responded, and 176 multiracial students responded. That would be 36% of the UTC population that identifies as multiracial, and 52% of the American Indian student body took the survey. Now, this graph describes the students taking the survey. So the students who took the survey, 78% were white. The next largest group was of the survey takers, 9% of the survey takers were African American, and 5% of the survey takers were multiracial, 2% Hispanic, 2% Asian, 1% American Indian, and 1% Middle Eastern, 1% Native Hawaiian. These are the percentages of the 3,200 students who took the survey. We asked about disability conditions, and these were the top conditions with the highest response rate. Taking the survey, 417 students said that they had a disability or a disabling condition, and these are the top 4. Sue Rankin was telling us, and we certainly can relate, that in years past, learning disabilities would have been the top one. But now we see mental health, attention deficit disorders, and chronic disease and medical conditions. A lot of that is because K through 12 students are having their IEPs and these conditions are being addressed. But something that we need to recognize is that with these top 3, students may be coming to campus with medication requirements. And so that could be a part of the descriptor of our students today. This is that religious spiritual identity that I was referring to. Of those who took the survey, 72% of the students were Christian. They identified themselves as Christian. 22% said no religious or spiritual identity. Again, there was a list of 22 choices if you include agnostic and atheist. And so 2% of the survey takers checked more than one. And then 2%, we have other religious, spiritual identity. That was us grouping because they were not Christian, they did not identify as Christian, or they did not identify as no religion, and they didn't check multiple, so there was another one that they checked. It could have been Muslim as an example. And so that was that category. Let me pause here to say that every campus receives the full report. Some campus reports are 600 pages. Some campus reports are 300 pages. Those full reports are yours. There is a volume of data available to you to analyze. This presentation is a mere overview. It's just, I don't want to say the tip of the iceberg because that's negative. I say it's the tip of the pyramid. That relates to me. So in any event, this is just the very tip of the data that you have available. We're doing an overview. People have asked, if I want to see about how my students in my college, how they're doing, how are they feeling about the campus, if they responded, we've got the data. You will have the data. So you can deep dive into all of this. Now, lots of our students now have child care responsibilities, caregiving responsibilities with older parents, disabled spouses. There's a whole realm and spectrum of caregiving responsibilities. In this chart, what you see, what you see is 8% of your undergraduates and 28% of your graduate students have caregiving responsibilities. So who are they caring for? Of the 8% of undergraduates who are caring for children under 5, it's 48% of them. Of the 8% of undergraduates who have caregiving responsibilities, 49% of that 8% are caring for a child 6 to 18 years of age. Similarly, of the 28% of graduate students who have caregiving responsibilities, 33% of that 28% are caring for children under 5 years of age. And 61% of the graduate students of this 28% graduate students are caring for children 6 to 18 years of age. And so you see dependent child, 18 years or older. We've got an independent child, we've got a sick partner, and we have a senior parent. So that's something that I think is different from when I was in college. Lots of our students are working. And so for undergraduates, 80% of them are working 1 to 20 hours on campus, and close to 45% of them are working 1 to 20 hours off campus. In terms of our graduate students, you see the numbers here. 28% of them work on campus, 52% of them work off campus, and then you see the percentages that they are working. Something to think about. We asked about their residence. 61% live off campus, 38% who responded to the survey live on campus. But 19 students responded to the survey saying that they have housing insecurity. They're insecure in terms of their housing. 19 students replied that in that way. So we asked them about, were they experiencing financial hardships? 47%, almost half of the students, said that they are experiencing financial hardships. 1,500 students replied that way. And what you see are the areas in which they are experiencing financial hardships. Not surprising to see affording tuition. That's almost 60% of the undergraduates, 60% of the graduate students. Not too surprising, purchasing books, 63% of undergraduates, 55% of the graduate students, affording housing, affording food, affording health care. So these are the areas of financial hardship for the students who took the survey. We asked about their participation in clubs and organizations at UTC. So 35% of the students who took the survey said that they do not participate in any clubs or organizations. That's slightly more than a third. And the significance of that is this gives them an anchor very often. Extracurricular activities anchor a student. The campus becomes a community for them. And when you look at the research looking at high school dropouts, when you look at the literature talking about higher education retention, not having an anchor, not belonging is one of the reasons that students are unsuccessful academically, because they don't have a sense of belonging. So when we see that almost a third of the students do not participate in a social activity or organization, that's something to think about. So what are the findings? We talked about what we found out demographically about those who responded to the survey. There's rich data that you can really dig down and deep dive into. But the findings from the survey from our students. Here are examples of strengths and successes. And I think you're going to feel really, really good about these. 85% of the students who took the survey were comfortable with the overall climate at UTC. 89% felt that their advisors responded to emails, calls, voicemails in a prompt manner. Sue Rankin says she never sees that response rate so high in that category. So that's like really phenomenal. 84% of the students who took the survey were comfortable with their classroom climate. 79% felt valued by their faculty in the classroom. Those are strong numbers. So let's look more at comfort with the academic climate. So again, 85% felt comfortable with the overall campus climate, 82% felt comfortable with the academic climate, and 84% felt comfortable with the classroom environment. In terms of the academic department, a higher percentage of student respondents with multiple disabilities felt very comfortable, more so than students with no disability. What you're going to see from this point on are items that were statistically significant. So in terms of departments, this is where the significant difference was shown. Let's look at overall climate. What we saw is that, again, statistically significant, a higher percentage of men students felt very comfortable with the overall climate, more than women student respondents. A higher percent of Christian student respondents felt very comfortable than multiple affiliation students who responded. A higher percentage of white students felt very comfortable with the overall climate than students of color and multiracial students. Continuing with overall campus climate, a higher percent of students with multiple disabilities felt more comfortable than students with no disabilities. Comfort in the classroom. A higher percentage of first-generation students felt more comfortable than not first-generation students. That's a summary of campus climate. Now let's look at challenges and opportunities. Here's some examples of challenges and opportunities. 14% of the students who responded to the survey felt that they had observed exclusionary conduct within the last year at UTC. That's observing exclusionary conduct. 8% thought that they had experienced unwanted sexual conduct while at UTC. 17% of the graduate students seriously considered leaving UTC, compared to 24% of the undergraduate students who seriously considered leaving UTC. What were the challenges of students with disabilities? These were the top barriers identified by students with disabilities. They identified the classrooms, the labs, campus transportation and parking, classroom buildings, temporary barriers due to construction or maintenance, so it's pretty good that it's temporary. And here are the other factors that they found as barriers. Let's look at experiences of exclusionary, intimidating, offensive, or hostile conduct. 317 respondents, 10% of those who took the survey, indicated they had personally experienced exclusionary behaviors such as shunning, ignoring, being ignored, intimidating behaviors, offensive or hostile behaviors, which can be described as bullying or being harassed within the past year. So 317 students, 317 people who took the survey, 10%. Of the 10% who felt as though they had experienced exclusionary conduct, what was that based on? 87 students, 27% of this 317 students felt as though their exclusionary experiences were based upon their political views. 17%, 55 students thought that 17% of the 317, which came to 55, felt as though it was based upon their academic performance. Similarly, 55 students felt that it was based upon their age, 48 students felt as though it was based upon their ethnicity, and 47 students thought that it was based upon their gender or their gender identity. And what were the top forms of exclusionary conduct that they experienced? They responded that they felt ignored or excluded, they felt isolated or left out, they felt intimidated or bullied, they felt that they were the target of derogatory verbal comments, and you see the numbers there. Some of this is what people would call microaggressions. They're being experienced by a number of the students at UTC. Now, this chart is saying of the exclusionary conduct that I experienced, I think it was because of my age. So, for students 18 to 19%, 9% of the people who took the survey who were 18 to 19 years old, 8% thought that they were experiencing exclusionary conduct because of their age. Let's go to some higher numbers, because I'm sure you got that explanation. Of the students who took the survey who were 35 to 44 years of age, 9% felt as though they had experienced exclusionary behavior. Of that 9%, 50% that were 35 to 44 thought it was because of their age. So that's the way you can interpret the graph. What about experiences of exclusionary conduct based upon racial identity? Students of color, 11% of the students taking the survey who identified as people of color, 11% thought that they had experienced exclusionary conduct. Of this 11%, which actually was 53 students, 26% thought it was because of their racial identity. Among white students taking the survey, 9% felt that they had experienced exclusionary behavior, and of this 9%, 4 thought it was because of their race. 16% of the multicultural survey respondents felt as though they had experienced exclusionary behavior. Of the 16%, 29% thought it was because they were multiracial. Gender identity. 8% of the men taking the survey thought that they were experiencing exclusionary conduct because of their gender. I mean, 8% experienced exclusionary conduct. 10% of the 8% thought it was because of their gender. 11% of the women taking the survey felt that they had experienced exclusionary conduct, and 15% of this 11% thought it was because of their gender identity. And where were they experiencing this? In classes, in residence halls, in public spaces, at UTC, while walking on campus and also off campus. And these are the ends, the number of students who responded this way, and the percentage of the total taking the survey. Student status, graduate students. 57% felt that the exclusionary conduct was coming from the faculty. Now, this is 57% of the 319 students who say that they felt excluded. 57% said this was a faculty member who made them feel this way. 21% of the graduate students said that it was their advisor. Now, we're talking 21% of the 317. 32% said it was another student. For undergraduates, they said that they experienced exclusionary behavior from other students, 57% of the 317. 19% said that faculty had been a part of this experience, and then their advisor, 8%. This is a very important set of data. 44 students who had experienced exclusionary conduct reported it. So 14% of the students who experienced exclusionary conduct actually reported it. 36% felt that it was not responded to appropriately. This middle box is interesting, I think. It wasn't the outcome that they hoped for, but they felt that their report was responded to appropriately, and 21% felt satisfied with the outcome of their reporting. We also asked students, have you observed exclusionary conduct? Have you seen others experiencing this? So 14% said, yes, I have seen this happen. What did they observe? They observed that there were derogatory verbal comments. They observed people being ignored or excluded. They observed persons being isolated and left out. They observed persons being identified. They observed racial, ethnic profiling, etc. And here are the numbers of students who observed exclusionary conduct. Of the students who observed exclusionary conduct, 40% of them said it was the person's political view. 26% said it was the person's ethnicity. 21% said it was their gender. 19% said it was their racial identity. Who were the targets that they observed? 63% of the students said that I saw other students experience exclusionary conduct. 22% said I saw a friend experience exclusionary conduct, and 14% said I saw a stranger. I saw this happen to a stranger. What were the sources that they observed? 56% of the students said I observed other students doing this. 14% said I saw strangers doing this. 13% said I saw faculty members. 11% said I saw this within student organizations. Experiences with unwanted sexual contact or conduct. 248 students taking the survey reported that they had experienced unwanted sexual contact or conduct. 103 students said that they had experienced unwanted sexual interaction. 69% said that they had experienced unwanted sexual contact. 41% said that they had experienced stalking. 25 respondents said that they had experienced relationship violence. And 7 respondents said that they had experienced sexual exploitation. 69, we're going to look at the 69 students who reported that they had experienced unwanted sexual contact. And that was defined on the survey as unwanted fondling, rape, sexual assault, penetration without consent. Who are the students that experienced this unwanted sexual contact? 6 were LGBTQ students. 6 were students with multiple disabilities. 4 were students with single disability. 3 were women. 1 was a man. 2 were heterosexual. And when did this happen? For undergraduates and for graduate students, well, particularly for undergraduates, this occurred their first year, and the largest number is their first semester. And in Sue Rankin's presentation to us, she says this reflects what happens nationally. This reflects the literature in that these incidences happen first year, first semester, first 6 weeks. The location. 58% occurred off campus, 45% of the respondents said that it occurred on campus. The top perpetrators: an acquaintance or a friend, a UTC student, a stranger, a current or a former dating or intimate partner. And here you see the expected emotional responses of the students who had experienced unwanted sexual contact. They felt embarrassed, they felt angry, they felt responsible some way, they felt afraid, or they ignored it. What were the active responses? 65% told a friend, 67% avoided the person or the venue, 29% said nothing, 19% did contact a UTC resource, and 25% confronted that person later. Here's some awareness and prevention successes. 98% of the people who responded to the survey who had experienced unwanted sexual contact, 98% of them said that they agreed it was their responsibility to report the incident. 89% knew the role of the Title IX coordinator was to report incidences of unwanted sexual contact or conduct. 85% of the respondents agreed that they were aware of campus resources. This section, called Intent to Persist, is now looking at students who are here at UTC but are seriously considering leaving. So why would they think about leaving? Well, 696 undergraduates said that they seriously have considered leaving UTC. That was 24% of the survey takers. 67 Of the graduate students, 17% of the survey takers said that they seriously had considered leaving. And this is a graph showing the percent and the numbers of those who seriously considered leaving UTC. In terms of racial identity, you see that the largest group is 37% of African Americans who took the survey had considered leaving. 32% of, now I don't have on my readers, multiracial considered leaving. 29% of the Hispanic students taking the survey said, I have considered leaving. And so you see the other numbers there. In terms of students with multiple disabilities, 41% have seriously considered leaving UTC. 31% of students with a single disability had considered leaving, and 23% of students with no disability have considered leaving. So those are numbers to truly look at. And when were they thinking about leaving? So you see that 44% in the first year, 38% in the second year, 19% in the third year, 12% in the fourth year or later than that. So they're here, they're working, but this percent is saying, I may not stay. But they're here, but they're thinking about, should I stay? What are the top reasons? Almost 40% of those students who seriously considered leaving UTC was because of a lack of the sense of belonging. It's that anchor again, which is so important for retention or graduation. A lack of a social life, again, not belonging. If someone had asked me, why do students consider leaving, I would have said financial reasons. So I was surprised that it's the third highest, not the number one reason. Personal reasons came in number 4. Climate not welcoming, homesick, lack of a support group. But lots of this speaks to the anchor, and then we do have financial reasons. Top reasons why graduate students considered leaving. Climate was not welcoming. Coursework was too difficult. A lack of sense of belonging. A lack of a social life. And financial reasons was the lowest among the top reasons why graduate students thought about leaving. Now, respondents who agreed that it was likely they would leave UTC without meeting their academic goal, 24% were non-citizens, 20% of minority people taking the survey, 18% of those who identified themselves as transgender, 18% of non-Christians, 14% of those who are disabled, 13% of those in the military, 13% of those who were not low income, and then we have 13% of heterosexual students. Overall, 13% of students thought that it was likely that they would leave UTC without meeting their academic goal. So why were students considering leaving? Concerns about academics, financial concerns, lack of a sense of belonging, lack of diversity. This came from the qualitative themes. Now that we have this slide up, let me share with you that what I am sharing with you are the quantitative data. And the extent of the quantitative data is immense. The amount of the quantitative data is immense. But there are also a lot of qualitative statements that will be important for you all to be aware of. Across the system, 10,000 students took this survey, and Dennis Hinkler has been analyzing and coding the qualitative statements. When I say coding, just redacting, so there's no identifying information. There are over 4,000 qualitative statements. Many of them are poignant to read. And so while there are lessons to be learned insight to be gained from the quantitative data, the same comes with that qualitative data. So this is just a sampling here. Now, there's a section of the survey that we call perceived academic success. Men undergraduate students felt better about their academic success than women students. Transgender students felt less about their academic success than undergraduate students. So how well are you doing academically? So this is their perceived academic success. White undergraduate students had greater perceived academic success than African American and multiracial students. People of color undergraduate students had greater perceived academic success than African American undergraduate students. LGBTQ had less perceived academic success. They felt they were doing less well than heterosexual undergraduate respondents. Undergraduate respondents with no disability had a greater sense of their academic success, or they thought that they were doing better than students who responded with single disability or multiple disabilities. Undergraduate student respondents with single disability had greater perceived academic success than undergraduate students with multiple disabilities. Perceptions of the campus climate. The majority, 72% of the students taking the survey felt valued by the UTC faculty. 69% of them felt valued by the staff. 79% felt valued in the classroom by the UTC faculty. 71% felt valued by their fellow students. And 66% felt valued by the other students outside the classroom. 59% felt valued by UTC senior administrators. 71% of those who took the survey perceived faculty as role models. 60% perceived staff as role models. 62% had found fellow students that they thought could be role models. I'm a speech language pathologist, and the president of our professional association was a junior when I was a freshman at University of North Carolina, Greensboro, where I started out. And I say I admired her so much, that's why I became a speech language pathologist. I had found a student who was a role model for me. 1/3 of the students, as we talked about, felt that faculty and staff prejudged them. So it's important to have anchors and role models. 67% felt that the campus climate encouraged free and open discussion of difficult topics. This was an example of an item not originally on the Rankin survey. This was a question that was important to the state of Tennessee. So 67% of UTC students felt that the campus climate encouraged free and open discussion of difficult topics. The majority felt that the classroom climate encouraged free speech within the classroom. 73% of them felt that. 69% felt as though free speech was encouraged outside of the classroom. More than half felt that senior administrators, faculty, and students had taken direct actions to address the needs of at-risk and underserved students. What about advising? Because that's so critical. 83% of the survey respondents were satisfied with the quality of advising that they received from their departments. 84% had faculty advisors who provided clear expectations. Isn't that the pathway to graduation? So 84% felt as though they were getting clear expectations. 90% felt comfortable sharing their professional goals with their advisor. Extremely important for that student's development. 79% said that they had adequate opportunities to interact with other university faculty outside of their departments. 78% received support from their advisors to pursue research interests. 75% felt that their department had provided them with opportunities to serve the department and the university in various capacities outside of teaching and research. Research is showing us that these last two are what are called high-impact activities. These kinds of activities really increase academic success. These high-impact activities really improve graduation rates and close graduation gaps. 73% of those who took the survey had department faculty members encourage them to produce publications, to present research. That's amazing. A majority felt that advisors, departmental faculty, and other staff responded to their emails in a prompt manner. So, institutional actions. Here are the top 5 campus initiatives that the students who took the survey said these positively influenced the climate here. So what were they thinking were positive actions? There is effective academic advising. There's effective faculty mentorship of students. There's diversity and equity training for faculty. There's diversity and equity training for staff. There's adequate social space. One of the top 5 available campus initiatives unavailable campus initiatives that would positively influence climate. A couple of these relate to child care. The respondents felt as though adequate child care resources, affordable child care would be helpful. Effective faculty mentorship of students. We found this at every campus. Some factors that they thought were positive, some respondents thought weren't there and were needed. So that's not unusual. They thought effective academic advising would be helpful, and opportunities for cross-cultural dialogue between faculty, staff, and students. A summary, and these you've seen before. We started the presentation with these, and I'll end with these. Here are the strengths and successes. The high comfort level with the overall climate of the campus, advisors responding promptly, the classroom climate being extremely comfortable, and feeling valued by the faculty in the classroom. Opportunities for improvement. Let's see, 14% had observed exclusionary conduct within the campus in the last year. 8% had experienced some form of unwanted sexual conduct. 17% of graduate students seriously considered leaving, and 24% of undergraduates had seriously considered leaving. And so the next steps relate to what I would suggest would be taking time to look at the data that are now yours. The data that came from the 3,000 students at UTC are UTC's data. And most questions that you could think about asking can be answered. So often we get a question, well, can I find out how students in various departments feel about the climates in their departments? If the students took the survey, we've got the data. You have a sense of the multitude of student parameters that are a part of the survey. All of those parameters can be used to study campus climate in innumerable ways. So the data are yours. So the next step, I would think, would be figuring out where you want to learn more about, what areas you want to learn more about. Thinking about what actions can be taken to enhance the strengths that we have, and what actions can be taken to address some of the limitations and the challenges that the students presented. For me, I feel immensely responsible for the students whose voices are a part of this survey. These are their voices. So I want to thank you so much. It was not by happenstance that so many students responded to this survey. They responded to the survey because of the invitations that came from the chancellor, the administrators, the staff. It was your efforts that got results such as these. Sue Rankin and Associates say they have never seen results such as these in terms of response rates and the academic climate being as welcoming, off the chart, looking at the 190 colleges and universities they have studied. Thank you so much for the opportunity to bring the results of this survey to your campus. Thank you.
I wanted to add something to follow up to Noma's comments, and then for faculty, staff, and students, if you have some things you would like to ask before we conclude today, and then the media, we've invited them to stay afterwards if they'd like to stay. When you leave today, you will get a sheet that will be distributed to you, because as we began to look across our campus, we found a number of activities and sessions that are going on that address a lot of the concerns we saw in the responses to the questions that were asked in the survey. And I think that says we're focusing on our students and on our students' interests and the things that are important to them. So I hope you'll take that with you. It is not an inclusive list, but it certainly is a cross-section of a lot of different things that are going on that reflect our students and our faculty and our staff interest in creating the most welcoming climate we can. I think the other thing, as Noma mentioned several times, is to look at not just the responses, but the number of responses. That gives us a little bit more accurate picture. So even if it's a question, since people could respond to more than one thing under some of those questions, the numbers are clearly important as we begin to analyze these. We are aware of the challenges, but we're also aware of our successes, and I think that says a lot about the efforts of those of you who work here, who have tried very hard to create a climate that allows students to learn and to grow and to become the individuals they want to become. So I want to thank Noma for, she's doing a marathon across the state effort to deliver the results to all of the campuses in the UT system. And so we're number 3, which means we're right in the middle, and she'll make her trip to the UT campus and to the Ag Center as well to deliver those. So I want to take just a moment and allow you to pose any questions, make any comments you might have if you're a faculty, staff, or student in response to the information she shared. This feels like my Latin class. I'm going to let Noma address this as well, but I will tell you this was in response to a request that we hadn't conducted a survey in a number of years. And so this was an effort to address that question. You want to add?
We do want to use these data as a baseline for continued assessment of how we're doing. How often that happens is yet to be determined. Sue Rankin, in fact, advises not to do it too close together, to let it be a time to give yourself, particularly from the initial introduction of the data, to give you time to study the data, to then make some plans, to implement the plans, and then measure the plans. And you sure can't do that in a year's time. You can't do that in 2 years. And so this is a baseline, and of course we want to see it continued, but the spacing really can be determined by the goals that you set.
Other comments or questions? Can I say thank you for sitting here and taking the time to look at what our students have said? So I see a nice cross-section reflected here of administrators and faculty and staff and people who are in offices that have the opportunity to make the kinds of decisions that will affect our students. So thank you for taking the time. I know that our chancellor wants us to have the chance to look at this more in depth, and I'm sure that a lot of you are thinking, wonder if I could find out a little bit more about the students that I work with on a regular basis, and certainly I'll have the opportunity to do this. But thank you for your afternoon.